The crack of a single shot tore through a college lawn and changed everything. Charlie Kirk, a towering and polarizing voice on the conservative campus circuit, was killed while speaking at Utah Valley University, and what followed was a manhunt, a confession, troubling new footage, and a nation trying to sort fact from rumor. If you want careful updates as this investigation unfolds, hit subscribe and turn on the bell now so you don't miss what comes next. Charlie Kirk was fatally shot during a Utah Valley University event on September 10, 2025. News. The day that began as another stop on a speaking tour turned into a grim, unforgettable moment. What organizers had billed as a public forum, a tented space on a campus lawn, students and community members milling about, cameras and phones upraised, became the site of a lethal, targeted attack. According to charging documents and statements from prosecutors, the shot came from a distance and struck Kirk while he was addressing the crowd, leaving medics and security scrambling and the event collapsing into panic. The killing was fast and precise enough that investigators treated it from the outset as a premeditated act, launching an immediate search for a shooter and warning the public to turn in video and photos that might help reconstruct the moments before and after the shot. That sense of sudden rupture, a place where ideas are meant to be exchanged becoming a crime scene, shaped the early narrative and set the tone for the intense scrutiny that followed. The scene itself, and the speed with which national leaders and media responded, made clear how singular this moment was. For many viewers, the images that circulated, brief clips from live streams, security footage released by authorities, stills taken by witnesses, were raw and unspooling, a reminder of the way modern technology can both document tragedy and inflame speculation. Law enforcement described a chaotic immediate aftermath. People running for cover, others dazed and tending to the wounded, and a campus that had to be secured and searched under extraordinarily difficult conditions. Authorities moved quickly to cordon off the area, retrieve any discarded materials, and process digital material gathered from dozens of phones and cameras. In the days that followed, the story's factual anchor, the September 10th shooting at Utah Valley University, was the point everyone returned to because it was the hinge on which all other questions turned. Who did it? Why? And was this the work of a lone actor or part of something larger? The shooter, 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson, fired from a rooftop and fled the scene. Federal Bureau of Investigation. +1. Investigators say the shot that killed Kirk came from a vantage point that gave the shooter clear sightlines into the outdoor forum, a rooftop of a building overlooking the event. Surveillance footage released by federal authorities showed a figure moving across a rooftop, and later jumping from the roof and fleeing on foot, an escape that left behind a route now being painstakingly documented by agents. The choice of a rooftop was not incidental. It suggested premeditation, scouting of sightlines, and an intent to distance the shooter from the crowd both to avoid immediate capture and to make the attack harder to trace. After the shot, law enforcement recovered what they said was a high-powered bolt-action rifle in a nearby wooded area. That weapon and other physical traces became central pieces of the forensic puzzle. The surveillance material had an immediate double effect. It reassured investigators that they had concrete leads, and it gave the public a cold, forensic view of how the attack unfolded. The rooftop footage, grainy, sometimes unclear, but unmistakable in its implications, became a focal point for investigators tracing footprints, palm prints, and other trace evidence. It also became part of the public record, replayed across networks and social platforms as analysts and amateur sleuths tried to map escape paths and potential accomplices. The choice of a rooftop and the speed with which the shooter left the scene reinforced the prosecutorial theory that this was not a spur-of-the-moment act but something the suspect had prepared for in advance. Robinson surrendered 33 hours later after a retired detective contacted authorities. BBC News. After more than a day of searching and an intense public plea for tips, the man authorities named as the suspect did not meet capture by force. Instead, the end of the manhunt came through a chain of private contacts. A retired detective recognized the danger and contacted law enforcement, and authorities coordinated a peaceful surrender. Officials described the handoff as careful and deliberate. The suspect ultimately turned himself into the FBI and local police after family members and intermediaries urged him to do so. The fact that the surrender was arranged, rather than resulting from a violent arrest, mattered to investigators and prosecutors. It meant they could quickly begin the process of questioning, forensics, and securing a custodial record without an immediate confrontation that might have added further injury or complicated the chain of evidence. The negotiated surrender also shaped public perception. In some quarters it raised questions about how the suspect was located. What role did technology, tips, or vigilant relatives play? And scientists and legal commentators noted how modern investigations often rely on a mix of high-tech surveillance, human networks, and mundane detective work. In this case, the involvement of a trained former officer and the cooperation of the suspect's family were decisive factors. That relatively peaceful resolution to the manhunt did not, however, slow the pace of legal escalation. Within days, prosecutors moved to file serious charges. Prosecutors intend to seek the death penalty, citing the crime's heinous nature. People.com. +1. State prosecutors quickly signaled the gravity with which they viewed the killing. Charging documents filed in the days after the assault listed aggravated murder among the counts and included allegations of obstruction and witness tampering tied to efforts to hide clothing, the weapon used, or to influence co-residents and witnesses. In high-profile killings that involve a public figure or appear to be politically motivated, prosecutors sometimes pursue the most severe penalties, both as a reflection of the act's seriousness and as a statement about the state's interest in deterrence and retribution. In this case, officials said they would seek capital sentencing options if the facts and law supported it. That announcement had immediate procedural effects. Defense counsel prepared for a capital case. Judges and courts began considerations about venue and jury selection, and public debate flared anew about the role of the death penalty in politically charged crimes. The pursuit of the death penalty also fed into the polarized reaction to the killing. Supporters of Kirk demanded the harshest possible penalties. Others cautioned against rushes to capital sentencing in an era of contested motives and complex digital evidence. Legally, the decision to seek execution means prosecutors believe they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt both the factual elements of premeditation and any aggravating factors that jurisdictions require for capital punishment. That's why your comment struck so deeply. To say, "I wish they were kidnapped," sounds shocking at first. But it's really an expression of the same balancing act the Sullivans are likely living every single day. It's a way of saying, if the alternative is that they're gone, let me at least hold on to the version where they're still alive. It's not about wanting something terrible to have happened. It's about refusing to accept something worse. History has shown us how powerful that hope can be. Think about cases where children were found years after their disappearance, alive, hidden, waiting. Those stories, rare as they are, become lifelines for families like the Sullivans. They prove it's possible. They prove that clinging to the idea of kidnapping, as painful as it is, isn't always a fantasy. Sometimes it's the truth. And until the truth about Jack and Lily is finally uncovered, that fragile possibility will always linger. The RCMP's challenge is immense. Thousands of hours of footage. Leads that go nowhere. The need to rule out false sightings while staying open to genuine ones. Every day they push forward, not just against the weight of the investigation itself, but against the expectations of a community desperate for answers. And every time they remind us they're still looking, it's as much a message to the Sullivans as it is to the public. We haven't given up, and you shouldn't either. But the longer this stretches on, the harder it becomes. Silence grows heavier with time. And in that silence, the idea of kidnapping, unthinkable in most circumstances, starts to look like the most merciful option left. Because if they were taken, if someone out there knows where Jack and Lily are, then there is still a chance, however small, that the story isn't over. In cases like this, history often becomes the only guide. When investigators comb through thousands of hours of video, they're not just watching for random details. They're searching with the knowledge of how similar cases have unfolded in the past. And there are plenty of examples where a single overlooked clip made the difference. Take the case of Elizabeth Smart, abducted from her own home in Salt Lake City back in 2002. For months, the trail seemed cold. Leads dried up, sightings turned into false alarms, and even her family began to wonder if they would ever know the truth. But it was a fragment of witness testimony and surveillance images of her abductor, veiled, almost unrecognizable, that eventually cracked the case wide open. Elizabeth was found alive, rescued from a nightmare most believed had already claimed her. Stories like that are rare, but they remind us why families cling so fiercely to the possibility of kidnapping, because sometimes, against all odds, it means there is still life to be saved. Closer to home, Canadian investigators have seen similar breakthroughs with surveillance. Cameras on city buses, doorbell systems, even gas station footage have given them timelines, exposed lies, and put suspects at scenes they swore they were never near. That's the power of video in today's world. It doesn't just capture, it remembers. And for Jack and Lily, who slipped into silence with no known witnesses, the possibility that a camera somewhere caught the truth is the thread that could unravel the entire mystery. But this is also where the frustration grows. When the RCMP announced they were analyzing more than 5,000 files, it raised a question in the community. What have they seen? Are they holding something back? Law enforcement rarely lays all their cards on the table, especially in sensitive cases involving children. Releasing too much can compromise leads, alert potential suspects, or contaminate witness testimony. So investigators balance carefully. Enough transparency to reassure the public that progress is being made, but enough secrecy to protect the integrity of the case. That silence fuels speculation. Some believe the RCMP already have more than they're admitting. Others argue the review is more about procedure than progress, that they're exhausting every possibility because nothing concrete has surfaced. Both views live side by side, and both feed into the emotional roller coaster faced by the Sullivans and everyone following this case. Hope swells with the idea that answers may be just around the corner. Fear lingers in the thought that the search could still end with nothing. For the family, this is the cruelest reality. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss, a state of grief where closure is denied. It happens when loved ones vanish, when their fate is unknown, and when every day brings a different possibility. Families in this state live in limbo. They can't fully mourn, because there's no proof of death. They can't fully celebrate, because there's no proof of life. Instead, they oscillate endlessly between the two, trapped in a cycle of hope and despair. It's one of the most painful human experiences imaginable, and it's exactly what the Sullivans have been forced to endure since Jack and Lily disappeared. That's why the kidnapping theory, as unbearable as it sounds, becomes almost comforting. It transforms absence into survival. It gives shape to the unthinkable by suggesting the children are still somewhere, waiting. When people say, "I wish they were kidnapped," what they're really saying is, "I need to believe they're still alive." It's a way of making sense of the senseless, of giving the heart something to hold on to when the mind is drowning in uncertainty. Investigators understand this dynamic too. They know that every word they release carries weight. That's why their mention of the video review wasn't casual, it was deliberate. They wanted to remind the public that the case isn't cold, that they are still pushing forward. And in doing so, they gave the community something to hold on to, however fragile it might be. But the longer these cases stretch without resolution, the heavier that hope becomes. People begin to search for signs in every detail. They wonder if silence means progress or failure. They replay theories late into the night, comparing timelines, analyzing statements, trying to find the missing piece themselves. For families, it's even worse. Every sound outside the window becomes a possibility. Every knock on the door feels like it could be the one. Every phone call becomes a heartbeat moment, a rush of dread and anticipation rolled into one. The Sullivans are living this reality every day. They are forced to carry on in a world that has taken their children without giving them answers. And as the RCMP continue their painstaking work, watching those thousands of videos, cross-referencing every frame, the family waits. They wait for the one image, the one angle, the one glimpse that could finally tell them whether to grieve or to hope. This is why the viewer's comment, raw as it was, matters so much. Because it speaks not just to one person's feelings, but to the unspoken reality so many are thinking. Kidnapping is a horror no parent should ever endure, but in the absence of proof, it remains a lifeline. It means Jack and Lily could still be alive. It means the story could still end with them coming home. And until the truth is found, that possibility, uncomfortable, desperate, and fragile as it is, may be the only thing that keeps the Sullivans and this community going. One policy response that gained traction in the immediate aftermath was renewed discussion about the responsibilities of social platforms. Lawmakers in both parties expressed concern about how unverified videos and incendiary messages spread so quickly, and some urged platforms to do more to remove content that could radicalize or coordinate violent acts. Others emphasized prevention, funding for community-based programs that identify and intervene with people at risk of online radicalization, support for schools and families in spotting warning signs, and the need for better digital literacy so citizens can recognize manipulated content. Those debates are complicated by First Amendment considerations and by the technical difficulty of policing decentralized networks, but the political pressure to act, at least on misinformation, was unmistakable. In short order, multiple committees announced hearings, and executives from major platforms prepared to testify about their content moderation practices and the balance between openness and safety. Why this matters and what comes next. The assassination of Charlie Kirk has ripped open a complex knot of crime, media, politics, and culture. On the simplest level, a person is dead and a suspect stands charged with aggravated murder, obstruction, and witness tampering. Prosecutors are moving toward the most serious penalties the state allows, and investigators continue to comb through footage and digital records. At the same time, the case has prompted broader anxieties. Evidence of possible tampering raises the specter of accomplices, the rush of conspiracy theories makes collective truth harder to attain, and the polarized reactions underscore how fragile civic spaces have become when political disagreement can so quickly be recast as existential threat. For the legal system, the path forward is methodical: forensic confirmation, pretrial motions, discovery, and eventually a trial where jurors must weigh conflicting narratives about motive, influence, and intent. For communities and platforms, the task is preventative: how to reduce the risk that radicalization or coordinated wrongdoing will find purchase in isolated individuals or in online echo chambers. And for the country as a whole, the moment presses a familiar but urgent question: how to safeguard open debate, on campuses, in town halls, and online, without allowing a climate of vitriol to fuel real-world harm. If you want ongoing coverage of court filings, forensic releases, and reporting that separates verified facts from rumor, subscribe and turn on the bell. We'll follow every public development closely and bring careful, evidence-based updates as the legal process moves forward. Key sources informing this reporting include the official FBI releases and surveillance videos, AP and Reuters coverage of the charges and evidence, reporting on the suspect's surrender and charging decisions, and analyses of the reaction on social media and in public life.